Good morning to all of you. Welcome to the second day of Young Investigators meeting organized by India Bioscience. So I'm Marika Lahiri and I'm from IISA Pune. Um, I've been lucky to have participated in 3 YIMS. Um, so my journey with AIM was the first YIM, which was held in Kerala, and it was even before India Bioscience existed. This theme is also memorable because I got to network with a lot of people with whom I still maintain very good relationships. They're also friends, and they've helped in various aspects in my research journey. This theme is also important because I had my daughter, and I left her when she was just 1.5 years, 1.5 months old, with my mother, and then came for this YIM because talking to other mentors around this, they said that you should come for this YIM. It's going to help you in your research career. So second YIM was the 10th YIM, which was the anniversary YIM. So all the 10 years since 2009, a lot of us gathered together. It was really nice meeting up with people that you don't meet up generally. And finally, here I am as a mentor. So I was a young investigator. In the first YIM, and today I'm here as a mentor. A brief outline of my research journey. So, as you can see there, I did my BSc from Presidency College in Calcutta. I did it in botany. So, I was in plant biology. But my real interest, especially in my third year of my BSc, was when I was studying cell molecular biology and biochemistry. And this was a very long time back, 1993 to 1996. We didn't have that much of opportunities. Biotechnology had not yet started in India. So I moved to um, England, where I did my master's at Sheffield Hallam University in biotechnology, and then went on to do a PhD at Wolverhampton University, working on breast cancer and nitric oxide synthase and the role of nitric oxide synthase in breast cancer. From there on, I moved to Boston, and I had 2 postdocs. The first one was at Tufts University in Boston, where I started on a different system, which was using yeast as a model system to study Huntington's disease. And then on, this was for 4 years, and then I was in MGH Cancer Center for 1.5 years before finally coming back to India to IISA Pune. So this was a journey of 10 years that I was outside India. And then when I was deciding to come back, uh, we came to India, we gave a lot of talks. So we did kind of a Bharat Darshan because it was both my spouse and me looking for jobs. We wanted to be in the same city, if not the same, not really the same institute, but unfortunately, we are in the same institute, in the same department at IISA Pune. So we actually have a lot of couples in our department, but then each of us do our individual science, and I think everyone is flourishing in their own as themselves. So I came to IISA Pune when IISA Pune did not even exist as a building. So this was I came for my job interview in 2007, and I joined in January 2008. Met Shashi a year before that, and he insisted that we apply to IISA Pune. When we came, there was nothing. But then we were promised that within a few months, you will be able to kickstart your lab. And Shashi did keep his promise because he was the chair of the department, that kind of existed at that time, which was just one more faculty and himself. And so this is our initial setup, which was this building called the Site Unity Campus. This was the central part that was completely taken for building IISA Pune, and we had a few floors on the other 2 towers. Suresh will remember that this is where you had started, so we have a ICE alumni there. This was the lab, so there was no dearth of the kind of infrastructure that was built when we first joined ISA Pune. We had a proper setup for labs. We had students. We were obviously teaching undergraduates as well as training them in our labs. So this was what it was in 2008 onwards. And this is where we are right now. It's a well-established research building. We have all the facilities, and we have an open lab system. So this was one thing that, since we were the early recruits of ISA Pune, we could design the labs the way that we wanted it, and we opted for an open lab system. So as you can see, this is the open lab system. There are about 5 faculty in each of these sites. We get about 2 islands to work in, and there are no boundaries. I mean, there are no walls separating one lab from the other, and therefore there is a lot of student, discussions, troubleshooting, etc. As well as, what is another important thing is this instrumentation room that we have on each floor on 2 sides of this main lab is where we put our instruments, whether we get it from grants or whether we get it from ISA funds, everything to the central instrumentation room that is on each floor, so that everyone has access to the instrument. So we don't, make same copies of PCR machines, because if you're in an individual lab, you want to have things separately. So we have this open lab system. So learning never ends, and even as a postdoctoral researcher, I learned a lot, which helped me later on, as a PI, to set up things that the way that I would want them to be. So when I was in Catherine's lab, which was at Tufts University, I was her first and only postdoc for the first 4 years, which meant that I had to take up a lot of responsibility. Because this was a university, we had undergraduates in the lab, so I would take care of undergraduates. There were PhD students. I also would take care of PhD students. I also took care of the lab logistics, so purchasing chemicals, etc., was also my forte. And then managing the students, graduate, undergraduate students. So this was a learning for me, not just for my own research. I also, as I said, started the yeast system, learning the ropes because I was doing cell culture before that, and understanding this disease, which is Huntington's disease. So we used yeast as a model system to study the instability that is seen in Huntington's disease, where you have increase in repeat numbers. This is Catherine. It was very fortuitous that we met last year in a meeting in South Korea, and this was after 20 years. I met her since I left her lab. She's still the same, and it was very nice that I could, interact with her and meet her, and she was very happy to, see me. The next lab that I went was Lee's lab, which Cancer Center, and this was a different setup from what was in Catherine's lab. This was an open lab system, and this is where I understood the benefits of being in an open lab system. And this is a lab full of postdocs. So here you have your individual projects, but Lee himself used to work in the lab. It was very uncomfortable when I first started off with, because I was not used to working with, the PI right behind me. But then I think it really benefited all of us in the lab, because you could interact, you could, discuss issues that were, happening, or even just share the data right there and then. So it was a nice experience of having Lee working in the lab along with us. And as I mentioned, it was also an open lab system, where we were with Nick Dyson's lab, who works on Drosophila, and right opposite we had Spiros's lab. So, it was a nice environment. And I invited Lee for the Indian Association for Cancer Research International Conference that I held in 2024. So it was a pleasure to have him in India. It was his first trip to India. And so this is what I would like to say, that, when you make, you have good mentors, and these mentors keep mentoring you. There's no end to the mentorship. And it's always nice to then meet them later on, when you establish as a PI or as a mentor for other individuals. And then joining as a new faculty, I think here we cannot not have picture of Shashi, because he was the one who initiated the department at ISA Pune, and learned a lot. He's been a great mentor for the 10 years that he was with us as the chair of the department. learned empathy, learned generosity. It's very difficult to match up with what Shashi is, but then, it was a training for us. And therefore, I learned how to do purchasing because I was never in the Indian. It was a learning curve. I learned how to foresee what I would need with regards to chemicals, because things, even till today, takes time. So even for your antibodies coming from US or Europe, it takes about 4 to 6 weeks. So you plan ahead of time. I started, purchase only two of each antibody, ones that are used mostly in the lab, so that, as soon as you touch the penultimate, vial, you will purchase, set up the purchase system, because it takes time. It takes time through the bureaucracy in the institute, and then it takes time later on for the things to arrive from abroad. Writing grants. So writing grants was something I started very early on, itself in 2009. Also got my first RGYI grant around that time. I had attended a couple of grant writing workshops when I was in Boston, both at Tufts as well as at MGH. So that helped me to have an understanding of how to write grants, and what research questions, and how to kind of modify the grant in a way that it's going to be attractive to the reviewer that is reading it. And importantly, uh, people management. Managing not just people in your lab, but managing people in the institute as such. Because we were small when we started off with, we had to interact with a lot of other departments as well as with the administration. And one thing that Shashi had mentioned to us was, rather than summoning staff to your office to discuss anything with regards to purchase or grants, anything, you go to them, because then you are kind of completely dismantling the hierarchy that is present. And it actually helps you, because you want the administration staff, especially the purchase, on your side, because you want to place orders, and you want things to go smoothly, and there should be no hindrance from their side. So they should help you, and therefore go to them. It does not diminish your standing if you actually go to them. So I'll briefly talk about my research. I was trained in cell cycle and checkpoints, and that is what I first set out to work with. But then I worked in mammalian cells. So we all know that when there is endogenous exogenous damage, it leads to activation of the cell cycle checkpoints, which halts the cell to allow for DNA repair. But now, if you have mutations in the DNA damage signaling cascade, it then leads to genome instability. And when the genome is unstable, you have apoptosis that takes place and removes the cells that have an unstable genome. However, if you have mutations in the apoptotic signaling cascade through various other, signaling deregulation, you finally land up with a transformed phenotype or a cancer. Also, there are estrogens, progesterone, as well as platelet activating factors, which are lipoproteins, that can also lead to enhanced motility and invasiveness, finally leading to cancer. I'm sorry, I think there's a difference between the Mac and a PC, and my figures have come out very weird, but I'll go on. So the protein that we have, okay, it's platelet activating factor, which is one of the proteins that we have worked with. So these are just some of the publications that have come out from the work that we have been doing. And the cancer that we actually focused on was breast cancer, because after coming back to India, I got to know that breast cancer is one of the number one killer disease for women in India, and it is very different from what it is in the Western population. So breast cancer occurs a decade earlier than the Western counterpart, so in their 40s, etc. It's also the most aggressive kind, and therefore it was important or pertinent for me to kind of study breast cancer and see how the Indian population is different from the Western population. So, what are the differences that we could figure out? But before going into patient samples, we came up with a model system in the lab, and this is where very good students in the lab matters, especially when you're setting up. So this is Surajit, who was ISA undergrad, I think the 2008 batch. He stayed in my lab for his fifth year dissertation, and he said that can we do something different? Can we do a 3D spheroid system? I said, sure. It was not my expertise. But in talking to Mina Bissell and Joan Brugge, we actually set up this system. So my lab was the first to set up the 3D breast Asina system in India. And Libby, extremely talented PhD student, she's my third PhD student who joined and took up this further work. So what is this Asina system? So we grow these cells, which are MCF10A cells. These are non-tumorigenic breast epithelial cells on extracellular matrix called matrigel. And they are allowed to grow for 16 to 20 days. And as you can see, by day 3, they form a number of cells. And by day 5, they form a spheroid structure with an outer layer of polarized cells and an inner layer of unpolarized cells. So the unpolarized cells, because they lose contact with the basement membrane apoptose, and therefore you find this hollow lumen. So you have a single layer of epithelial cells surrounding a hollow lumen, and this is what phencopies the breast acini in humans. So using this model system, since we could actually look at various day points during the morphogenesis, we went ahead and studied how transformation takes place. So we used various kinds of DNA damaging agents as well as phospholipid mediators to see how they can transform these non-tumorigenic cells grown as 3D acini. We also deregulated some of the genes such as APF5 and TOPBP1, two of the proteins that we work in the lab. And we also saw that it also led to transformation. And what we study as transformation is when some of the hallmarks of transformation, which is polarity disruption, increased proliferation, EMT phenotype, increased matrix metalloprotease secretion, increased motility, invasion, and finally anchorage independent growth. So using these characteristics, I just show a few slides with the data, is when we did phospholipid mediator PAF. So PAF is important in the normal physiology, but when you have chronic secretion of PAF, it can be deleterious. And we see that it leads to transformation of cells when you grow them for 16 days. So when we looked at the polarity, as you can see in the control, you have uniform expression of the alpha 6 integrin, which is the basal polarity marker. But in PAF, cells that have been treated with PAF, you can see that there's mislocalization and there are gaps. So it is not uniformly being secreted or being sent to the plasma membrane. We looked at GM130, which is a cis-Golgi marker. So this shows the apical polarity in these acini. The Golgi should be towards the hollow lumen. However, we can see that the Golgi is completely mislocalized in the PAF-treated acini. When we looked at cell-cell junctions, we looked at beta-catenin, and you can see that here in the control, you have uniform beta-catenin, you have uniform cell-cell junctions. However, in the PAF-treated, it is completely disrupted. When we looked at proliferation, so we looked at Ki67, you can see that in the control, there is no proliferation because these are growth-arrested acini. However, in the PAF-treated, you can see a lot of Ki67 positivity. And then when we looked at EMT, vimentin, which is the mesenchymal marker, you can see that there is an upregulation of vimentin. So we have done many more assays after that. But finally, what we do show is that when you give when there's chronic secretion of PAF through the PAF receptor, which gets overexpressed, we get cell proliferation leading to transformation. On the other hand, we also see there is an increase in the matrix metalloproteases being secreted by the cells, and thereby that leads to invasion and finally transformation. With another project in the follow-up project which Libby had started, we did same things with regards to transformation, but what she also showed was that when you give DNA damage, you see an effect in the nucleus, but the effect is finally seen in the cytoplasm. So what we saw is that GM130 should be very compact in the non-transformed phenotype, which is what we see. But when she gave this methylating agent, you can see that the GM130 is now spread out. It is no longer compact. And this is what we see in a lot of cancers, that the GM130 is no longer compact. And The other aspect we saw was that this was through activation of a signaling cascade, which is DNA PK. So there's phosphorylation of DNA PK. And to make sure that this was DNA PK, we used a small molecular inhibitor of DNA PK, and we could actually inhibit phosphorylation of DNA PK, and the Golgi became compact. So in this study, we also showed that Golgi trafficking was also perturbed. So there were many various assays that we did that showed that Golgi trafficking was completely perturbed. And when we used the inhibitor, we could kind of revert back some of the polarity phenotype Golgi trafficking. So what this is just a summarization of the work is what Libby showed was that following DNA damage, there's activation of DNA PK, which led to this aberrant Golgi phenotype leading to impaired intracellular trafficking. And probably this is why the polarity markers do not reach the plasma membrane on time. You also have polarity disruption in EMT-like phenotype, which then gives rise to invasion. And finally, transformation. Um, Leading from this project, we actually started looking at a completely different project, which is not even my expertise, which is looking at the cytoskeleton. So when we use tubulin as a loading control in our Westerns, and every time we were using tubulin, we were not able to load equally. And that's when we figured out that following DNA damage, there is an increase in tubulin. And we showed that both by Western as well as by immunofluorescence. And this then led the lab to move into this area of role of DNA damage and cytoskeleton dynamics. So what we did was used again various DNA damaging agents, and through activation of phospho-DNA PK, we saw that there was a change in the microtubule dynamics, and we also showed that there was increase in post-translation modifications, which also led to Golgi dispersal. And through various other studies, we showed that there was an increase in the Golgi-derived microtubules that were being formed. So you set up with, you start your lab with one project or a few projects, but then it really depends upon the data that you generating and how the project goes. So be open. It's always a learning. There are many things. So I'm not a microscopy person. I was never trained in microscopy, but each and every student of mine are experts in microscopies, because as you can see, all the data that I've shown is heavy on microscopy. I learned through them. And then when working with the microtubule project, we are doing this in collaboration with Arnob, with Karsten. And so again, this again brings in collaborators, because you're not the expertise, and therefore reach out to people and ask for help, suggestions, guidance, and sharing of reagents. This is a totally different aspect that I was very lucky to be a part of, which is the DBT-funded Genome India project. This was the 10,000 genomes that were sequenced. There were 20 centers, so this is a large consortium project. What we did was that IISER Pune was a sample collection center. We collected from 4 different communities, so about 1,100 42 samples, which was sent for sequencing to Bangalore, and then sequence alignment, etc., was done. And finally, this project has come to an end. And so these are things that, so through this project, I got to meet 20 different other institutes and their PIs and individuals that are working on this project. And it was a big network. It also showed that sometimes in these big projects, there are a lot of sparks, or everybody has different mentalities. So being on the same wavelength is very, very difficult. But then you learn how respect others, respect their opinion, and come to a middle ground to move the project ahead, because we all are different individuals, we all have our own opinions, and so there's always a lot of clashes that do take place. But 20 institutes together, we finally did get the Genome India project completed. And from this, there will be many offshoots of this project where we will.
Sorry,
Okay. Oh God! So I love. So I have to rush now. Now that I have 1 minute. So the other thing was that collaborations within the institute, I have active collaborations with chemists, and this is just one of them, Pinaki. And there they design these molecules that are channels, and therefore they are very specific for only cancer cells. So since I'm a little short of time, I'm just going to go ahead a little faster. So what we have looked at is we add these channels to the cells, and then we study whether they are leading to cell death. So we have been able to show that these are specific for cancer cells and not harming the normal cells or non-transformed cells. I'll skip the data, and we've also used our 3D cultures to actually look at how these channels work in the cells. So this is the lab when I started off with. Initially with two PhD students, Payal and JP, but JP finished his PhD with Shashi. And then this is my current lab. Um, these are only my PhD students, so I have right now 7 PhD students, and this is a person from Collaborators Lab in NCL. So what is important, because the lab is your research lifeline, they are the ones that are doing the experiment. So the first few years I was actively in the lab because I had to train my PhD students. I still go into cell culture, I still train every individual that is going to do cell culture. I train them personally because I want them to follow the lab rules. So I still go down to cell culture, and importantly, dismantle any kind of hierarchy in the lab. It is very important because without that, you will not be able to run a lab smoothly. And that also means you set up the lab ethos. Everyone is equal because we have undergraduates, we have PhD students. There's sometimes the undergraduates do come up with great ideas, and it should not be snubbed down by a PhD student because they feel that they are senior. So having the setting up the lab ethos is very important, because remember, every individual is different. And over the course of my 18 years as a PI, I've come across so many different kinds of individuals, some great individuals, some not so good individuals, but you have to learn to deal with them effectively and make sure that everyone is at the same page. And as mentioned by Mohan, lab socials are very important. So I had continued the trend of getting food during lab meetings. So I still do that. Whenever we have lab meetings, we also have eatings along with the lab meetings. And we also do go out for lab trips, etc. Important thing, and that's why I have a separate slide, is setting up the daycare. When I joined ICER, and I had my child after that, I was the only one who needed the daycare desperately. So the then director, Kane Ganesh and Shashi, gave me one room in that Site Unity campus where I set up the daycare with my nanny and my daughter. And this was what it was for about a year, because in 2009, no daycare around Pune, there weren't many even, would take any child below 1 year old. But I can't wait for my child to become 1 year old for me to start work. So this was a great initiative, and I thank obviously the director and Shashi for um, giving me this opportunity to actually set up the daycare. So then I took up the helm to set up the daycare when we were many more faculty. This was in 2015. This is actually the ground floor of the guest house at IISER Pune, where we took 16 rooms and set up the first official IISER daycare. And finally, we have our own building, and we have 50 students, 50 kids in the daycare, and it's a fully functional daycare, and I'm still in charge of the daycare, and we allow people from other neighboring institutes to even send their children here, because they feel that this is one of the best daycares that they can have in Pune. Because this daycare was not just for me, it was also important for any gender, for male or female, to safely leave their child and then go to work till 6:30. And that also, I should mention that we never would have meetings that went beyond 6 p.m. because we have child pickup. So that is also important. I remember mentioning this, that no meetings on weekends and no meetings post 6 p.m. because we have childcare duties too. Um, something that we have been doing outside the research aspect is this group called Power Bio, which is the partnership of Women for Equity in Research in Biology. So this is just a year old. It was started initially by Vinita and a couple of us. And now we have many more members, and we have members here that are part of the Power Bio, which is Rashna here, and many people here. And I saw Rashna, that's why I could mention you. So we are part of this Power Bio where we are trying to bring in equity for women. And what do I mean by equity is that we talk about equality, as you can see from this image here. The support is the same, but it doesn't work for many individuals, say for women or the LGBTQ individuals, or people from different castes or religions. So there you need some little extra support, and therefore we are trying to bring in equity. But in reality, this is what we do see. Some people have a lot of support and they are moving ahead in time, and some of us are really down in the dungeons. And what we really, really would like to achieve is actually having this kind of a system where you make you have policies, etc., that will make sure that everybody is on the same page. You are getting the same opportunities, and therefore you need to have systems in place that will give everyone that same opportunity. Because as a woman, I can say that for myself, you also have to think about family. And I mean, research has been going great, but it's not just your child, it's also, for a lot of people, parents, because now they're all elderly parents, so you also have to look after them, and it always does fall on the woman to actually manage both research and the home front together. And therefore it's a balance, and it's always a lot of work for us. um, so, key takeaways: build networks with your peers. This is important, and this is what I learned during my first YIM. And I remember even Shashi sending me to various places, say CCMB, etc., to learn and to see how the cell culture system was set up in India, so that coming from abroad, everything was very different, and I learned the ropes through these kind of mentorships and through these relationships. Lead with empathy and inclusivity, because a lab really thrives when you have parity in the lab, and everyone feels safe and obviously motivated all together, and collaborate meaningfully, because complex research questions cannot be answered solely by you, and therefore collaborations helps to kind of merge these big questions together. And the journey will be messy and non-linear, but it is your journey, and you should embrace it with like any good experiment, with openness, uh, patience, and confidence. And finally, I'd like to thank all my past and present lab members, collaborators, and the great mentors that I've had. And thank you.
Thanks, Mayurika.
Thank you.
We take two quick questions.
Ma'am, did you check the microtubule assembly in like majority of the breast cancers is a BRCA deficient? So what's the difference between
So
the
BRCA
microtubule
deficiency is only found in 15% of familial cancers.
Okay.
So not on all in
And,
all
and, and did you
cancers.
check like apart from DNA PKC, did you check ATM and ATM?
Yes, they are not activated.
Okay.
Hi, thank you for that amazing talk. I was wondering, is there a vacancy in Iser Pune for a couple? Jokes aside, so I have one scientific question. Is
Yeah.
that on treatment of with DNA PK, you saw an increased quantity or increase in microtubules? There,
So this was giving DNA damaging agent, I
yeah,
see. So UV or any methylating agent, there's
yeah.
increase in the microtubules, yes.
Yes, and I think few years ago there was an amazing paper. When doxorubicin is given to breast cancer cells, there is an increase in tubulin and microtubules, and indeed there is an increase in secrete of exosomes. So my expertise is in exosomes. So I was wondering if you have some bandwidth for collaboration. I would love to chat with you
Sure.
about that.
Yes.
Thank you so
Definitely.
much.
Yes.